Welcome back to Aristotle. This time we'll go more in depth with what Aristotle actually says in the first two books of Nicomachean Ethics. Nicomachean Ethics is likely lecture notes and it jumps around a lot, so I've decided to present this in my own order. Let's jump straight into means and ends. The good of making a bridle is not good all by itself. It has a purpose, and that purpose is to fit onto a horse's face and help the rider control it. It is a means, and the horse riding is an end. This means horse riding is the superior good. Both are good, but one is still for the sake of the other. Aristotle thinks that morality is an art and can be analyzed the same way. If human action is a means, what is the ultimate end? Morality. But which morality? If you ask anyone, rich or poor, educated or uneducated, everyone says happiness. Many won't want to translate eudaimonia, but roll with me for a minute. Aristotle's analysis has been strikingly similar to utilitarianism with that word happiness, especially John Stuart Mill. However, Aristotle thinks that this doesn't yet answer the question, which happiness? When we're looking for morality, we're looking for human morality. Looking for the general form of the good is not helpful since it is unachievable and incomprehensible. This leads to the next question. What is the human person? We are first and foremost alive, and we have a life that is more than mere nutrition and growth, and more than perception. Aristotle thinks we are body and soul, but he doesn't mean what you think he means. The word soul applies to any life form. We need to dismiss this confusion before we keep going. The body is obvious and is what you think it is. The soul is not obvious. He doesn't think the soul is a separate substance. Most people that believe in a soul think that it's like the real you that is inside the body, and then at death you continue to exist as the soul without the body. Not for Aristotle. There is no religious connotation. Soul in this context is more like animating principle, and humans have a rational animating principle. That's why he's bringing it up. Seriously, don't overthink this. Plants have plant souls, dogs have dog souls, humans have human souls. The word soul is not special here. Back to this slide. The human person is body and soul. Our soul has a rational component, unlike other souls. And then later on, he says that the plant and animalistic elements are also present in the human soul. Since the human soul has a rational component, our morality must reflect that. Which happiness is the correct idea of happiness? It's going to be the most fully human one. That also only answers the question halfway. What is happiness? The same person will answer that happiness is health when sick, is money when poor, or they'll admire some inexplicable idea that catches their imagination. All of these are, of course, unsatisfactory. He thinks this question should be synonymous with what is the good human life? Aristotle entertains the four most common claims. First is pleasure. This is stereotypical of the peasants, but Aristotle compares this to the life of beasts and is unsuitable for human beings. However, this answer isn't baseless since the good life includes pleasure. Next is honor. This is stereotypical of the nobility, but Aristotle thinks that this is superficial as it is entirely dependent on others' opinions. However, this too isn't baseless since the good life includes honor. He also includes wealth, but immediately dismisses it as money is a means to an end and can't be what we're looking for. Finally, he includes the contemplative life. I wonder which one he'll choose. My own personal analysis might be helpful here. It seems a life of pleasure is overly active because pleasure is fleeting and you'd live in a constant chase. Likewise, the life of honor is overly passive, since we can even honor the dead. This means the contemplative life should be the Goldilocks zone between them. What is the contemplative life? Since this is the same as human happiness, it is the most superior of ends for human action. Since it itself is not a means to anything else, it must be complete. There are no other goods outside of this. It is the final goal. Specifically, there are no other human goods outside of this. All good things are wrapped up in this ultimate goal. This is the way that Aristotle incorporates all humanity, and especially our rationality, into the idea of happiness. So the next piece of the puzzle is to identify what the means are to acquire this end. If the means is lumber, the end is carpentry. But lumber is an insufficient means. It's not as if lumber turns into furniture all on its own. You'll also need a carpenter. But this is still insufficient for good carpentry. If we want to ask, is the carpentry good, we need the carpenter to perform her function well. For that matter, it's actually just as important that the lumber function well. Function relates directly to the word good. A good product functions well. A good action functions well. A good goal functions well. Artificial things have functions. This video has the function of teaching you about Aristotle's ethics. If it's a good video, it does that well. If it's a bad video, it doesn't do that well. Natural things can also have functions. The function of my eye is to see. The function of my hand is to grasp. The function of my feet are to walk. So a virtue ethicist would say that what I am determines how I ought to function, and I am a human person. To find the correct means to the contemplative life, we need to ask, what would it mean for a person to function well? If we state the function of man to be a certain kind of life, that is, the contemplative life, and this to be an activity or actions of the soul, implying a rational principle, and the function of a good man to be the good and noble performance of these, and if any action is well performed when it is performed in accordance with the appropriate excellence. If this is the case, human good turns out to be activity of soul in accordance with virtue. Virtues are those human excellencies that we ought to perform well, and they all must be thoroughly human and therefore thoroughly rational. Since happiness is an activity of soul in accordance with perfect virtue, we must consider the nature of virtue. Virtue isn't technically limited to ethics, although Nicomachean ethics is. Intellectual virtue comes from learning, and it results in knowledge, and then you act from that knowledge. Moral virtue comes from habit. Habits require practice, and your moral actions will come from these. How do we know virtues are habits? Things that are found in the soul are of three kinds: passions, faculties, states of character. Virtue must be one of these. Passions are emotions, as well as things like pleasure and pain. Virtue is something that can be given praise and blame, but passions are not like this. Example, an angry man might be blamed for his anger, or might not be, depending on the circumstance. There also isn't a lot of choice concerning how you feel about things. Faculties are the capacities that we have naturally from our human nature. Virtue is not natural, but is something developed. States of character are the habits we form over time by practice. How do we form moral habits? First, then, let us consider this, that it is the nature of such things to be destroyed by defect and excess, as we see in the case of strength and of health. For to gain light on things imperceptible, we must use the evidence of sensible things. Both excessive and defective exercise destroys the strength, and similarly, drink or food which is above or below a certain amount destroys the health, while that which is proportionate both produces and increases and preserves it. All goods can be in excess or be deficient, so habits are the cultivation of the balance in between. This is just as true with the virtues. Courage governs our feelings of fear and confidence, and it is balanced between cowardice on one end and recklessness on the other. Both cowardice and recklessness are equally wrong. Both lack courage. Temperance governs pain and pleasure, and it is balanced between intemperance and insensibility. Pleasure is good, but too much indulgence and too much abstinence are both contrary to the good life. Liberality governs how we use our money, and we can be cheap or extravagant, but both are unwise. Pride governs our approach to honor. You should know your worth, and it is wrong to be either vain or humble among others. There are a lot of these, and usually virtue is the habit of dealing with your own emotions. In virtue, all human goods, both of body and soul, come together in excellence. So, the virtues are the source of the happy life, and these virtues together give us the superior human goal. All right, the video's all done. So now you need to go out and cultivate that virtue. Thanks for watching.